welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In the previous episode, we discussed Stanisław Wojciechowski, Poland's second president, and his time in Russia during the First World War, as well as his involvement in Polish politics between 1918 and 1920. In this episode, we will look into the voting process that made him president in 1922, following the assassination of Poland's first president, Gabriel Narutowicz.
We left off at the time of the start of the presidential election in 1922. Poland had been ruled by, there was a parliament, but a lot of the power was really in the hands of the so-called Naczelnik Państwa, or chief of state, which was naturally Józef Piłsudski, who had been given a lot of power during the Polish Bolshevik War in 1920, and he didn't want to continue with this. So the first presidential election to replace him with a president was scheduled to take place in 1922. Piłsudski himself didn't want to run. He was the obvious candidate for a large part of Polish society. There was another leader, an agrarian leader that was the main face of the agrarian movement, Wincenty Witos, but he also didn't want to run. So the PSL party, or the two parties that I mentioned before, they gave different candidates. Piast nominated the Minister of Internal Affairs, Stanisław Wojciechowski. PSL Wyzwolenie nominated their own candidate, which would later go on to win. And the real favorite of the election was really Count Maurycy Zamoyski, the candidate of national democracy, the nationalists. The election took place in such a fashion that there was a National Assembly called, which meant that both chambers of parliament, the Senate and the Sejm, they had a vote, and they had a vote. I'm not sure how to describe the process in English, but it's more or less that there are several rounds of voting, and the candidate with the least of votes drops out
at each stage. Yes.
At each stage, and in the end, the two favorites at the start were really the candidate of PSL Wyzwolenie and Count Maurycy Zamoyski. But once the election started, things started slightly turning out of hand. And as the voting progressed, Wojciechowski finally lost to Zamoyski. But since you could say that everybody united against the nationalists, the left, the representatives of the national minorities, which in the Polish Second Republic were naturally very large. And then finally, Piast, Wojciechowski's party, which was assumed to support the nationalists in this last round of voting, they threw their support also behind the candidate of PSL Wyzwolenie. So the nationalists, when they realized that they had lost the election, were naturally furious. They were also shocked. So once the new president was installed, one of their supporters, he walked up to the president and shot him when he was visiting an art exhibition 5 days into his presidency. So there was a second election that year, and this time Stanisław Wojciechowski won it and became the president. He would serve as president for almost 4 years. The big events during his presidency was a currency reform that he was very involved in shaping. It was a major problem, as Poland had been separated into three various partitions for over a century, and forming one common currency turned out to be much harder than imagined. All the other old money had to be taken out of circulation. New money had to be introduced. It was a general mess. Finally, there was also, in 1925, problems really started appearing on the horizon. A trade war and tariff war started with Germany, which naturally being the largest economic power in Poland's vicinity, it created a major problem. We also must remember that during the First World War, the front, it went back and forth across Poland many times. There were places in Poland that saw the front pass back and through over a dozen times, and each time it meant more and more artillery shelling and general destruction. So the country was really in ruins, and this trade war with Germany didn't improve the situation. Poverty was widespread, and this general malaise, you could say, affected the people and also led to a very volatile situation in Parliament, where new coalitions were being formed all the time. In Parliament, there were many parties, as the electoral threshold was very low, and there was a lot of quarreling, and these different formations would form. There would be different parliamentary majorities, meaning that sometimes you could have 3 or 4 governments in a year. A situation which is somewhat similar to that in Italy today, you could say.
Yes.
So finally, Piłsudski had enough. There was another big threat that he saw on the horizon in 1925. The Western powers also signed the Locarno Treaty with Germany, which guaranteed the German border in the west with France and the other states of Western Europe, but left out any declaration for Germany's eastern border. So it left a door open for Germany to possibly take back what they had lost in the Versailles Treaty, and take back those territories of Western Poland, which the Germans felt belonged to them.
Adam, I'm just going to have to interrupt you there. As usual, the studio clock is blinking in the corner, saying that we must bring this episode to a halt, but we will, with your permission, take up the story next time. There we are. I've had to stop Adam almost in mid-sentence, but we will be back on Poland Daily History in the next episode to pick up where we left off. Thank you for watching, and do join us next time on Poland Daily History.